Guys, I finally got it. I got the Anova Precision Chamber Vacuum Sealer. I've been looking forward to this day for a long time. But before we even get into the review and the specs and the demo and all of that, I wanted to show you guys something fun because everyone needs to see this. I've got marshmallows. We're gonna drop 4 marshmallows in here. I want you to watch what happens because it's really interesting. Everyone needs to see it. I'll show you one thing with regard to the product before we start. To turn it on, you just simply flip that red switch and you're good to go. It fires up. But let's get into this little experiment. It's going to be a lot of fun. So I'm just going to place 4 of these marshmallows into the chamber to show you how this chamber vacuum sealer works. Let's go for strong vacuum mode just to show it a little better. And here we go. So you can see the marshmallows actually beginning to expand. And they're getting bigger. And bigger. And now they finally, I think, reached peak and they're starting to actually get back to normal size. Roughly normal size at this point. And in 3, 2, 1, the air will escape. And they shriveled up. They're like marshmallow raisins of sorts. Let me show you. Look at that. They're like raisins. I'm gonna have one. Not as fluffy as you would expect. But that demonstrates how chamber vacuum sealers work relative to edge sealers you might be more accustomed to. So the edge sealers simply pull out the air of the bag, whereas a chamber sealer, what's actually happening is the pressure is dropping within the chamber. So the marshmallows were expanding because there was more air within that marshmallow than the chamber surrounding it. So it was trying to escape and the marshmallow would expand. And then finally, when the marshmallow got to its peak size and started to shrink, that's when the pressure started to normalize from within the marshmallow to the rest of the chamber. And then finally, that point where it just shrunk down like a raisin was when the atmospheric pressure was the same as that within the chamber, such that it put a lot of pressure onto the marshmallow and it just shriveled up like a raisin. So like I said, you might be more accustomed to those edge sealers. That's what I had before. But now Anova has made these chamber sealers really affordable. And you can actually purchase one. This one's roughly $350, which is pretty amazing because when I was looking at chamber sealers before I bought my edge sealer trying to make that decision, they were more like $1,000, maybe the cheapest like $700. So now it's half that $700. It's like $350. And that makes it really competitive with those edge sealers. And when you're thinking about chamber sealers, there are 3 big things to remember as you compare them to those edge sealers. One is, because of what we just talked through with that demo, you can actually seal liquid. So you can seal soup. We'll go through that demo. You can seal liquids. It's not a problem because what's happening is the contents aren't moving. There's not a vacuum trying to pull that out. It's staying in place in that bag. And the pressure is working to void that bag of all the air, and then it seals. So liquids are not a problem, which is pretty amazing. And what else does that mean? That means you can actually do things like infuse or extract. So you can do like vanilla extraction with that change in pressure. You can do infusions of things like chili oil. You can do pickles, which again we'll demonstrate. So that's point number 2. Point number 3, which is a pretty big point, is think about the bags. So when you are using an edge sealer, you need very specific bags for that. Those bags have ridges to help with that suction of air out of that. But with a chamber sealer, the bags are just your normal everyday plastic bags without those ridges, so they cost a lot less. And they're interchangeable between manufacturers. So let's break that down a little bit more. So chamber sealer bags are roughly 10 cents a piece, and you can, like I said, you can interchange them between manufacturers to find that best price. The edge sealer bags are anywhere from, call it 50 cents to $1 a piece. So at the end of the day, when you're comparing those two bags, the chamber sealer bag is roughly 1/10 of the cost of a edge sealer bag. So big advantage to chamber sealers from that perspective. And now as the unit price for this unit here has dropped to 350 bucks, it starts to make the math of a chamber sealer versus an edge sealer a lot more comparable, to where, because of all the things you can do with a chamber sealer, I would highly recommend the chamber sealer versus an edge sealer. And we'll get into all of that, we'll demonstrate it, and just show you guys how this chamber sealer works, so you can judge whether it's right for you. Now, when you're thinking about chamber sealers, the big thing to keep in mind, again, relative to edge sealers, is because you are vacuuming that chamber, your limitation is going to be the size of that chamber, right? So, like we talked about before, this is less expensive than your traditional chamber vacuum sealer. Part of that is because it is smaller. So what does that ultimately mean? Well, a couple things. Those $700,000 chamber sealers, the bigger ones, they're really heavy. They're roughly, like, call it 80 pounds. This is more like 18 pounds, so it's very mobile. So you can choose to put this on top of your counter and keep it there because it is beautiful. Or you can stow it away, pull it out whenever you need it. Not a problem. That isn't so much an option with those other chamber sealers. But the drawback is it is smaller. So actually, let's go ahead and measure it. Let me grab my tape measure. Measuring the outside first. From a depth perspective, it's roughly 10.5 inches. From a width perspective, it is 13 3/4 or so. And then from a height perspective, and I'll get the display in here, but it is just over 9. Call it 9.5 inches or so tall. So that's the outside dimensions of it. Pretty small footprint. The chamber itself, let's take those measurements. Now, again, from a width perspective, it's just over 12 inches in that chamber. I'm gonna measure the inside, and from a height perspective, it is 7.5 inches to the seal bar, so you'll want a little more bag than that. And then from a height perspective, in terms of clearance here, you're gonna be at roughly 3.5 inches or so. You're probably gonna wanna keep your jars and stuff to, call it 2 3/4 to 3 inches, and you'll be fine. But that's the clearance from a height perspective. So what does that all mean? A chuck roast, one of those pretty large Costco chuck roasts that are 2 to 3 pounds a piece, that'll fit in here. You won't have a problem with that. Something like a rack of ribs, you're gonna probably have to cut in half to make it able to seal within the chamber vacuum sealer. But again, you can do a lot more with this machine than you can with an edge sealer, being those infusions, those extractions. We'll also talk about sort of the dry cool mode. So now let's get in talking about the machine a little more. So it's got a metal finish, it feels really nice, and it's got a beautiful display. So the difference between this chamber sealer and many other chamber sealers is, or every chamber sealer I've seen anyway, has gauges sort of on the side here. They've actually, Anova's put the display on top in a digital format. What I do find missing versus other sealers is there's not like an analog gauge for the vacuum pressure within the chamber. You just have basically your countdown in terms of how long it's going to vacuum and the sealing countdown, but you don't have a pressure gauge to know or to see what's actually going on inside the chamber from a pressure perspective. So one other thing to note about these chamber sealers is there are two primary forms of them. One is with an oil pump, one is without. This is without an oil pump. What that means at the end of the day is there's less maintenance involved with it, so it is a lot more convenient from that respect. So do know that this is a oilless style of chamber vacuum sealer. I just want to walk you guys through what's actually inside the chamber as well. It's important. So if you look at the chamber, we gave you the dimensions already. There is the sealing bar is removable, so it's really easy to pull off and put on. You just plop it right on. There's some conduits that you just push it onto, and you can clean that real easily. So that is there. There's also a bag clip over here, so it just pulls up, pushes down, Make sure you're holding your bag in place on top of that sealer bar when you're ready to go. And then there's a port. So you can use external ports with the chamber sealer. Just plug it onto here. You can run the mode and you'll be good to go from that perspective. So there is a port for those vacuum canisters, if you will, and things of that nature. You can also get things like to plug wine. So there's a lot of accessories you can get. That port will work for those. Now, in terms of what's on the Anova here, so there are 3 different programs on the machine here. So there's an infuse extract, so that would be great for something like a chili oil. You can make it sort of instantly here versus taking weeks or months. In a similar vein, there's compress and pickle mode. We'll make some pickles, we'll run through that example. There's a dry and a cool mode as well. So the dry and cool is going to be some of the newer technology around some of this innovation is that you can take something like bread out of the oven, and instead of letting it cool over a long period of time to develop that crust, you can do it pretty much instantaneously in here to create a really nice crust. So that's another use of a chamber vacuum sealer. All these things are things that you really can't do with edge sealers. Then we get into the 2 main things, which just like edge sealers are the vacuum seal itself and the seal of the bag itself. So those are the 2 pieces that you have on the display as well. And you can toggle between normal and strong mode. So strong mode, it gives you a 40-second read, and normal, it gives you a 30-second read. And that's how long the vacuuming will actually occur. And then you have seal, and you have strong, normal, and off. So you have the ability to turn it off. Strong goes for 5.5 seconds, normal reads at 3. And you do have the ability to manually change these. So if you hold the vacuum button down, it then lets you, then it brings up and a down arrow, right? So you can actually change the length of that vacuum, and it goes all the way up to like 90. I'll show you guys. So it goes, I'm holding it down. It'll bring you all the way up to 90. Yep, 90, and then it'll bring you all the way down. I think it's to 3 is where it goes on the bottom, but let's check and verify that. Bear with me. Actually 10. So 10's the lower bound, 90's the upper bound in terms of vacuum. I'm gonna put it back to 30. You can also, like, when I'm doing this, what I'm essentially doing is changing the preset for normal. I'm gonna put it back to 30 is what the OEM, what the manufacturer standard was. So we're gonna leave it at that, and then you can do the same thing with seals. So you can change that as well. So if you wanna do a longer seal, you certainly have the ability to do that. You can manually adjust these things. The key is to hold down that vacuum or hold down that seal for, let's call it 3 seconds, and then you'll see up and down arrow digitally pop up. Use that to manually adjust so you can cater things the way you want to. And that's gonna be really useful when you're trying to vacuum seal something more delicate, like a bread. So if you have a vacuum sealer, or sorry, an edge sealer, you may see like a lot of them have like a pulse mode or a delicate mode. You can manually get to that through those manual adjustments in the chamber sealer. It's gonna take a little playing with to get to know what you need for whatever it is in particular you're using, but you have those manual adjustments. So before we actually jump into actually vacuum sealing some things, I wanna let you hear it, and I wanna compare it to an edge sealer. So I've got the Anova Precision Vacuum Sealer Pro as well, so I'll let you compare the 2 with your ears. I'll pull out my sound meter too so we can actually measure it, but we'll start there, and then we'll get into the good stuff of actually vacuum sealing things. I just want you to hear the difference between an edge sealer and a chamber sealer by the same manufacturer, just to give you some flavor of the difference there. All right, so let's start with the chamber sealer. I'm gonna turn the seal off, and we're gonna run, I'll just run normal mode here, and then hit start. So we were running at 68 to 70 was sort of the dBAs on this one. So compare that to the edge sealer. And again, as you could see, I was taking the measurement sort of right atop the machine. Now if we run the edge sealer in a similar fashion, let me just reset here. Okay, so let's go, we'll go dry mode, which is somewhat equivalent to the normal mode. We'll just go dry mode and vacuum and seal. Let's see what we get. So this was a touch higher. So this was higher. So it was in the 80 dBA was sort of where we were at. 68 to 70 here, 80 here. So significantly louder is the edge sealer. The chamber sealer wins then. Neither one of these are quiet. They're both loud, but on a relative basis, the chamber vacuum sealer is quieter than what you might be experiencing with an edge sealer. All right, so now let's get into actually sealing with it. So let's start with the easy stuff first. So just to let you guys see like how it actually works, I got some meatballs here, some chicken meatballs. So we'll seal those. So you get a feel for how this would work. Again, this would be something you'd obviously could do with your edge sealer too, but I should mention the weight of this glass top is really nice, and what's also nice is it is gentle closing, if you will, so you don't have to worry about like dropping it and breaking it from that respect. It's a really nice touch. So I'm just going to drop the bag into the chamber. There is a little clip here that you can pull up on that allows you to put the bag underneath it. So I'm going to take the bag, I'm going to run it underneath that clip, push down on the clip, and then you just want to make sure your bag doesn't have any wrinkles on it or anything over that vacuum bar. But now you do that, you give it a close. We're going to seal this. I'm just going to run normal mode here. Make sure we seal at a normal strength 2. So the way I interpret the normal versus strong sealing strengths are, strong is a lot like moist mode for those edge sealers, in the sense that you're going to want a little more time to seal in case you have any moisture on that bar. So that's a good way to think about it, at least in my head, is to think things you would do on moist mode when you're using your edge sealer, do on strong mode on your chamber vacuum sealer. With that, let's jump into actually sealing this. So again, we are on normal vacuum and we're on normal sealing strength. I'm gonna hit go. So if you're used to edge sealers, you're not gonna see that bag coming out right away. It just stays to where the pressure is all dropping equivalently, and then when that ends, the air will escape, and then you will seal. So it's a different, don't think it's not working, is my point. It operates differently than the edge sealer from that perspective. So we're done here, and I'm gonna open it up, and the other thing I wanna note to you guys is look at that. You've got a beautiful double seal there. So just like the Anova Precision Vacuum Sealer Pro that does a double seal, this too does a double seal, which is great for sous vide cooking if that's your thing. This channel is called Top Sous Vide, so I expect many of you do sous vide. So know that it comes with a double seal, which is very important. Big believer in double seals. But yeah, you can see, perfectly sealed bag. Everything looks good. And let's move on to the next thing. Let's do the soup. So this is something you wouldn't be able to do with an edge sealer, but you can with a chamber vacuum sealer. Let's see how that works. So I've got a soup here. I always like to just turn it upside down from my canister. So I've got my soup in here. Wipe away anything around the edge just in case. And we're gonna plop it in to the chamber vacuum sealer. See how it works? You can do this instead of, so again, I'm gonna pull up on the hold, the clip, and put that down, press down on that. Make sure we're not bunched at all anywhere around there, which is all looking good. Make sure it would press down flat there, which it is. And then I'm gonna close it. I'm gonna run this one, like I said, the equivalent of moist mode from a seal perspective, I'm gonna run on strong, just because there is some moisture there. And we're just gonna vacuum it at the normal setting. And let's go, let's see how it goes. So again, it's not pulling the air out of the bag. The pressure is normalizing, is dropping within that chamber, such that when it ends, all that air is being pulled out of it. Countdown. All the air has escaped now. And we're done. So you'll hear that beep. That's your signal to know everything is indeed complete. So again, a beautifully sealed bag. Got your liquid in it. No issues. Perfect. And what's really nice about these, you can store it flat, right? So like when you're in the freezer or in the fridge, you can just stack everything on top of each other, which makes for just far more efficient storage. So if you're doing something like ground meat, you can store a lot more of that in your freezer because it's just ergonomically packed such that you can just stack it on top of each other, not waste any space. So there's a soup. I hope you enjoyed that. You cannot do that with an edge sealer. So this is a really exciting thing to me. You guys, hold on a second. So just to make the point, see, so this is the frozen soup, similar, if not same soup as that. And it's frozen, so like I will just stack these on top of each other in the freezer, which is, it's just fabulous. It's perfect. All right, let's do some pickles. So I just took, when you're doing pickles, what you want to do is get your cucumbers and just, you want to go 1 millimeter to 2 millimeters. And then I've got like a vinegar, water, sugar, salt, some dill sort of a recipe that I just found on the internet. If you want, I'll post it, just leave a comment and I will be happy to do that. Maybe we'll make a video on pickling with the chamber sealer. But let's try it. So what we're gonna do is put our jar with the cucumbers in it. And the other thing you should know is they recommend you don't fill the jar more than halfway, and you don't want stuff to spill out. So try and keep your liquid to about halfway. And then we're gonna change ourselves to the pickle mode. So we're on pickle mode. And then they say you wanna run it 2 to 3 times. I'll taste it in between each one of those cycles, so I can try and communicate to you the taste difference between 1 cycle, 2 cycles, 3 cycles. So with that, let's go for it. So there's 1 cycle. I will give 1 pickle a taste. There's definitely some flavoring that has penetrated that pickle. But let's just run it for 2 more cycles. All right, we'll run it for 1 more cycle and then the 3rd, but let's go here. So one of the tricks, hopefully the vacuum sealer is not too loud, but one of the tricks, don't think yourself limited by, the clearance we measured was like 3.5 inches. You want to also leave some clearance under that, so let's call the cap of 3 inches that you want to put a jar in there. But when you're pickling, that's not your limitation. You can put things in a Ziploc bag and pickle them that way versus pickling with a jar. Just keep it open like you would when you're doing like a soup or something like that. But don't think you're limited by the height clearance. you can do them in a Ziploc bag. So we've run 2 cycles now. I'll do my best to communicate to you. You can actually tell the big difference in color, so I don't know if you could see that, but this is far more translucent now that we've done the infusion. The big difference between 1 and 2 cycles. Really, I want to try the 3rd one. I'm really curious now. That dill, everything's really coming through nicely. Let's run it one more time. So the big, beautiful thing in this is, normally with pickling, it would take weeks, months, what have you. You can all of a sudden decide, if you got some cucumbers in hand and you got vinegar, like, you can make yourself cucumbers on the spot, which is amazing. So we're good there. 3 cycles in. Let's taste it. Far more translucent. That was a great pickle. So keep that in mind. Don't do it for 1 cycle. Go 2 to 3 cycles. I could even see myself doing 1 more cycle. And then let me just show you guys what these two look like versus one another. What's the best way to do this? I think you do something like that to get it to focus, but there's your pickle, there's your cucumber, and you can really see a big difference in those two. So that was our pickling experiment. It really works. It's really good. Okay. So we did marshmallows to start with. We did chicken meatballs. We did the soup. And we did pickles. The one thing we didn't do was infuse extract. So that's really useful if you want to do stuff like I said, chili oil would be great like that. Again, instead of weeks, months, you can do it on the spot. You can also do like alcohol, so think about like, I don't know, crazy stuff like gummy bear infused vodka or like fruit infused vodka or anything of that nature. You can do that with that mode. The compress and pickle mode also is good for things like watermelon or fruits where you want to change that texture and get it more dense. You'll find that in a lot of finer restaurants, they do that. So you're able to play with the texture of that fruit. With that compressed mode as well, that is the same as the pickle mode. And that dry cool, like we said before, is really good for things like breads, to where you want to really speed up and more or less instantaneously get that crust onto the bread after you take it out of the oven or what have you, so it doesn't have to rest. You can use that mode to create crust really quickly. So some other things to keep in mind, like we said, there are other manufacturers that create pretty similar machines. So when you're thinking about bags, what you're gonna wanna do is make sure you keep in mind the shape of the chamber itself, such that what you don't wanna do is have the open edge be the shorter side here. You want it to be the full, that more like 11 inches. Again, let me measure here. So yeah, more like, you want the opening of the bag to be on that 11 inches and the length of the bag to be roughly 8 inches. So 8 by 11 or so is what you want to go for there. Another manufacturer is Avid Armor, so you could look for Avid Armor bags. But if you keep those dimensions in mind, that's a way to approach finding those bags. And then you want to pay attention to the millimeters. So I think they go as thin as, call it 3 millimeters, and up to 5 millimeters. 4 or 5 millimeters seems like a good option to me when you're thinking about those bags, but that is one thing to keep in mind as well. So guys, I'm noticing a huge difference between the chamber sealer versus the edge sealer. Subscribe to my channel. I'll tell you more about chamber sealers. We'll do more recipes and things of that nature. Please subscribe, and I look forward to seeing you next time.